The Haunting of Willow Grove. Willow Grove was a small, quiet village hidden deep within misty forests and surrounded by gnarled, ancient trees that seemed to whisper secrets to the wind. The villagers, steeped in old superstitions, led simple lives and held on to ancient tales passed down for generations. Among the stories whispered around fireplaces and shared in hushed tones was the tale of Elara, the ghost of Willow Mansion. Elara had lived in the grand old mansion on the hill overlooking the village many years ago. She was known as a kind-hearted young woman with a spirit as bright as the summer sun. Everyone in the village loved her, and so they were overjoyed when she was set to marry Thomas, a man from a neighboring village. But the night before her wedding, Elara vanished without a trace. Some suspected that she'd run away, others believed she'd fallen victim to an accident or foul play. The truth was lost to the years. After her disappearance, strange sounds began to emanate from the abandoned mansion. Villagers claimed to see a figure in white drifting through the mansion's halls or wandering the grounds at dusk. She became the subject of endless ghost stories, and most villagers avoided the mansion, fearing Elara's restless spirit. One chilly autumn evening, a group of friends visiting Willow Grove decided to explore the mansion. They had heard about the haunting, but dismissed it as a local legend, meant to scare tourists. Laughing and joking, they brought flashlights and entered the house, snapping pictures as they went. Yet, as they stepped inside, an uneasy silence blanketed the air, and the laughter quickly faded. "Feels colder in here, doesn't it?" muttered one of the friends, Sarah, pulling her jacket tighter. The others exchanged nervous glances, but they pressed on. As they walked through the dusty, darkened rooms, Sarah noticed a strange shimmer near the grand staircase. She felt an icy chill crawl up her spine and instinctively stepped closer, trying to get a better look. Her friends, noticing her unease, stopped laughing. Suddenly, a faint, sorrowful sobbing echoed from upstairs. The sound was distant, yet hauntingly clear, like a voice from another world. The group felt a collective shiver and tried to leave, only to find that the front door, which they'd left ajar, had somehow slammed shut. "What's going on?" whispered one of them, his voice laced with fear. With no way out, they decided to head upstairs, hoping to find another exit. The sobbing grew louder with each step, leading them to a dusty, locked room at the end of the hall. They hesitated but managed to break the lock. As they entered, they noticed a worn, faded diary lying on a rotting wooden table in the center of the room. Sarah picked it up, brushing off the dust, and began to read aloud. The diary belonged to Elara, and as she read, the tragic story unfolded. Elara had been excited about her upcoming wedding, filled with dreams of her future with Thomas. But in the days before the wedding, she'd discovered something horrifying. Thomas had been in love with another woman. They had conspired to keep their love a secret and planned to leave Elara behind. Heartbroken, Elara had fled to the mansion, unable to bear the betrayal, and there, in her isolation, she had fallen ill. No one came to find her. She had died alone, waiting for a love that had abandoned her. The friends read on in shock, the cold of the room seeping into their bones. Suddenly, the faint sobbing transformed into anguished wails. They turned and saw her, a ghostly figure materialized in the corner of the room, her face a mask of sorrow and betrayal. Dressed in a tattered wedding gown, she reached out to them, her hollow eyes pleading for understanding, her form shivering with unresolved pain. Realizing the depth of her suffering, one of the friends, his voice trembling, spoke softly to the ghostly figure. "We understand, Elara. We'll tell your story. You won't be forgotten." The words seemed to calm her. She slowly lowered her outstretched hand, her face softened, and she became almost transparent, as if a weight had been lifted. The ghost gestured toward the diary, revealing one final page, a plea written in shaky handwriting. It was her last wish, a desire for someone to know her pain, to understand her suffering. The group took the diary, and as they did, Elara's form faded entirely, leaving behind a silence filled with a strange sense of peace. They hurried out of the mansion, heart pounding but with a newfound resolve. Back in the village, they shared Elara's story, showing the villagers her diary and recounting the terrible betrayal she had suffered. The villagers, saddened by the tale, decided to gather at the mansion that night. They brought candles, lighting the grounds in Elara's honor, and shared prayers for her peace. That night, as the candles flickered in the cool autumn breeze, Elara's ghost was seen one last time, a pale figure standing by the window, her face serene, no longer filled with sorrow. She gazed out over the village she had loved, and then, as dawn broke, she disappeared forever. The mansion remained a place of remembrance, no longer feared, but cherished as a reminder of the healing power of truth. Villagers would tell Elara's story to their children, not as a ghost tale, but as a tribute to a young woman whose spirit had finally found peace. Years later, the mansion was restored, and Willow Grove became a place where travelers would come to honor Elara's memory. The village embraced her story, ensuring that her spirit would never be forgotten. And some say, on quiet autumn nights, you might still hear the soft notes of a sorrowful melody drifting through the air, a gentle reminder of Elara's story and the peace she finally found. Chapter 2. The Awakening. The haunting of Willow Grove had become a memory, a whispered story that grew softer as the years passed. The mansion, once feared, had transformed into a local monument, symbolizing the village's journey from fear to acceptance. Visitors came to admire its grand architecture, not knowing the secrets its walls still held. But peace was fragile, like the first dew on a spider's web, and beneath the mansion's polished surface, an ancient energy stirred. One crisp autumn morning, Amelia, a historian from the city, arrived at Willow Grove. She'd read the story of Elara and was fascinated by the blend of history and folklore surrounding the mansion. While her colleagues dismissed it as mere legend, Amelia believed that every story held a sliver of truth. She had come to uncover it. Amelia was a diligent researcher, accustomed to poring over dusty records in forgotten archives. She requested permission to access the mansion's unused rooms, places tourists didn't go. After all, she reasoned, if she were to find any trace of Elara's past, it wouldn't be among the polished halls and carefully restored rooms. The village mayor, reluctant at first, finally allowed it. "Mind you," he warned, his voice low and cautious, "Elara found peace years ago, and we don't want to disturb that." Amelia nodded but felt a thrill of excitement. As she entered the mansion with her satchel of notebooks and a camera, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was walking into a place caught between worlds, a place where memories drifted like shadows. The first few days yielded little. Amelia's research took her from room to room, dusting off old furniture and scanning faded wallpaper for hidden symbols. But the walls were silent. She couldn't help but feel a growing frustration, as if the mansion itself resisted her investigation. Then, on the third night, while studying blueprints of the mansion, she noticed something peculiar. There was a small space hidden behind the north wall in the library, a crawl space that didn't appear on any recent records. Intrigued, she spent hours searching the library, tapping on the walls until she found it, a barely noticeable seam along the wooden paneling. With effort, Amelia pried open the panel, revealing a narrow hidden passageway lined with dust and cobwebs. She hesitated, flashlight in hand, but her curiosity outweighed her caution. Crawling into the space, she soon found herself in a small, cramped chamber, and there, in the center, lay a bundle wrapped in decaying cloth. Heart pounding, Amelia unwrapped it, revealing a collection of letters bound with a red ribbon. The letters, written in a beautiful but trembling hand, bore Elara's signature. She clutched them tightly, feeling a surge of triumph and trepidation. Back in her room, she carefully unfolded the letters, her hands shaking. The words that greeted her were haunting and vivid. Elara had written them in her final days, filling each page with sorrow, anger, and fear. The letters spoke of secrets and betrayal, deeper than what had been revealed in her diary. Elara had uncovered a terrible truth about the village's oldest families, including her own. "They knew I would uncover it," read one of the letters. "They wished to silence me, to hide what our families have done. But I won't let them forget. Even in death, I will remember." Amelia felt a chill run down her spine. The betrayal Elara had suffered wasn't just from her beloved. It was a conspiracy far darker, a secret woven into the very fabric of Willow Grove. And perhaps her spirit hadn't been seeking peace, but justice. The story that the villagers had honored for years was only a small fragment of the truth. As Amelia finished reading, a gust of wind swept through the room, snuffing out her candle. She held her breath, suddenly aware of a presence in the shadows. She felt an unnatural cold settle over her, and a faint, echoing whisper reached her ears. Who will listen? Who will remember? Amelia's heart raced. The presence felt tangible, as if Elara's spirit lingered nearby, awaiting her reaction. Steeling herself, she whispered, "I will." The presence withdrew, but a residual cold lingered in the room, like a promise. Amelia knew now that her discovery was only the beginning. Elara's story hadn't ended with her tragic death. It had simply lain dormant, waiting for someone willing to confront the truth. As dawn broke over Willow Grove, Amelia stood at the mansion's window, gazing at the village below. She would uncover the secrets of this village and give voice to the ghost that had been silenced for too long. Chapter 3: The Shadow of Truth. In the days following her discovery of Elara's letters, Amelia became consumed by the haunting words that revealed a deep betrayal and a cover-up within Willow Grove. She felt as though a shadow hung over her, and as she moved through the mansion's dim, dusty rooms, the silence felt thicker, charged with an energy that hadn't been there before. She could sense it. The mansion's walls had more to say. On her fifth night in Willow Grove, Amelia decided it was time to confront the mayor, whom she suspected knew more than he had let on. She'd noticed the way he grew uncomfortable whenever Elara's name was mentioned, the subtle, evasive expressions he wore whenever she asked too many questions. Determined to uncover the truth, Amelia headed into the village square, where a few villagers lingered around fires, sharing stories and drinking cider under the moonlit sky. She found the mayor in his office, studying a set of documents in the glow of a single lamp. The warm light cast long shadows, giving his face an eerie, tired look. He didn't look surprised to see her. "Miss Amelia," he greeted her solemnly, gesturing for her to take a seat. "I suppose you're here about Elara." Amelia hesitated, but her resolve quickly returned. "I found her letters. They paint a much different picture than the one the village remembers." Why was her story buried, and what was she so desperate to reveal before she— Amelia paused, lowering her voice, "before she vanished?" The mayor's eyes hardened. He sighed, clasping his hands together, as if steeling himself for a truth he had tried to bury. "Elara's story," he began slowly, "is one that many of us have chosen to forget. But you're right. It's time someone knew." Years ago, he explained, the village of Willow Grove had thrived under the quiet protection of an old secret society that had kept the village from harm. This group, composed of the village's oldest families, believed that Willow Grove's peace depended on maintaining a balance between old traditions and sacrifices. Each generation carried this responsibility, ensuring that Willow Grove remained untouched by the outside world's troubles. Elara's family had been central to this society, guardians of the mansion and the rituals that kept the village secure. But Elara, in her youth, had rebelled against the old ways. She wanted to bring light to secrets the village had long kept in the dark. Her impending marriage had been a means of freeing herself from the constraints of her family's legacy. But Elara had discovered something, a dark truth hidden within the society's practices that shook her to the core. In her letters, she wrote of a betrayal deeper than her lover's infidelity. She had hinted at an ancient ritual involving the sacrifice of a young soul from a chosen family, a practice believed to appease whatever spirit watched over Willow Grove. Elara was going to expose it all, the mayor admitted, his voice thick with regret. She was going to dismantle what had kept our village safe, and so, some believed she needed to be silenced. Amelia's heart pounded as she listened, the weight of the truth sinking in. "But you knew," she whispered. "You knew, and yet you've kept this going. Why?" The mayor's gaze grew distant, haunted. "We were afraid, Miss Amelia. Afraid of what might happen if the balance was broken. I was young then, and by the time I understood the cost, well, Elara was already gone." A heavy silence settled between them, filled with the weight of years of silence and suppressed guilt. The quiet was broken by a sudden chill that filled the room, and a faint, sorrowful whisper drifted through the air. Amelia felt goosebumps rise on her arms. "She's still here, isn't she?" she whispered. The mayor nodded solemnly. "Her spirit's been bound to that mansion ever since, and until someone brings justice to her memory, she'll remain trapped, a victim of our fear." Armed with this knowledge, Amelia returned to the mansion that night, her heart racing with both fear and determination. She carried a single candle and the bundle of Elara's letters. Standing in the mansion's grand hall, she felt the air grow colder, and a faint shimmer began to take shape near the staircase. "Elara," Amelia called softly, her voice echoing in the dark silence. A figure appeared, a young woman, beautiful yet ethereal, her eyes filled with sorrow. Elara's gaze met Amelia's, and in that moment, Amelia felt the full weight of the tragedy that had bound her spirit to this place. "I know what they did," Amelia whispered. "I know why you couldn't rest." Elara's figure seemed to soften, her sorrowful expression melting into one of gratitude. The room filled with a sense of peace as Amelia laid the letters on the floor and lit the candle, letting its gentle flame flicker in the darkness. "Your story will not be forgotten," Amelia promised. "The village will remember, and justice will be done." For the first time, Elara's spirit seemed to shine with a gentle glow. The chill in the room began to lift, and with a final grateful glance, her figure faded, her presence lingering only in the warmth that filled the hall. The next morning, Amelia spoke to the villagers, sharing Elara's true story. Though they were shaken, the people of Willow Grove gathered at the mansion that night, each lighting a candle in remembrance. The mayor stood in silence, his face drawn, but there was a hint of relief in his eyes. He had finally made peace with the past. As the villagers honored Elara's memory, a gentle breeze swept through the air, and the mansion, once cold and eerie, seemed to breathe a sigh of relief. Elara's spirit was finally free, and Willow Grove felt lighter, as though a weight had been lifted.